Beneath the scorching New Mexico sun, rancher Marcus Webb guided his dusty mare through the wasteland at a measured pace, each hoofbeat stirring clouds of desert sand. 4 hours, he'd been tracking a wandering bull, following hoofprints that had nearly vanished in the sun-baked ground. This desolate expanse offered him solace, the profound quiet interrupted only by creaking saddle leather, whistling wind, and the distant cry of a circling hawk. Marcus treasured these moments of solitude, where silence reigned supreme. Then came an unexpected sound, barely audible, perhaps just the breeze playing tricks. A noise resembling a forgotten exhale. He stiffened in his saddle, tilting his head, pulse quickening. The sound returned, a faint cry, fragile and piercing, like a violin string about to break. Swiftly dismounting, he secured his horse's reins to a weathered branch. Rifle across his shoulders, he navigated through scattered juniper trees and rocky outcroppings until he discovered a natural amphitheater surrounded by ancient cottonwoods. There, suspended beneath the largest tree, was a young woman. Her arms were bound above her head, wrists secured with rope, body hanging limp as a discarded puppet. Her toes barely grazed the earth. Sun-bronzed skin bore layers of grime, while her raven-black hair was tangled with perspiration and dried blood. Her breathing came in quick, uneven gasps, but life still flickered within her. Marcus's attention fixed on the rough wooden placard hammered into the tree bark above her. Bold red letters, painted with fury and hatred, declared, "White man don't forgive." An involuntary step backward, nausea rising in his throat. The atmosphere grew oppressive, part threat, part declaration, part malediction. He surveyed the surrounding terrain, searching ridgelines and boulder formations. Nothing stirred except wind rustling through brittle leaves like phantom voices. His fingers found the blade at his hip. "Dear God," he whispered, "what horrors have they inflicted upon you?" The captive woman stirred slightly, her head drooping forward, revealing angry welts where the rope had carved into her flesh. He forced down his revulsion. "Can you hear me?" he called out, voice cracking. Silence. "I mean you no harm," he said more gently, speaking as much to himself as to her. His boots scraped against stone as he approached. Her features became clearer, youthful, perhaps 18 winters, with prominent cheekbones and determined jawline, her face gaunt from dehydration. Crimson stained her lower lip. Testing the rope's tension, he found it crafted from twisted mesquite fibers, coarse and weathered. Whoever had secured her here intended prolonged suffering, not swift execution. Drawing his knife, his hands trembled. That accusatory sign haunted him, echoing with unspoken guilt for crimes he'd never committed, yet somehow felt responsible for. Another weak groan from the woman shattered his hesitation. "Damn them all," he muttered, pressing steel to rope. "I'm not what they claim." One decisive cut severed her bonds. She collapsed forward into his waiting arms. Her fevered body felt weightless, as if pain had consumed her very substance. Dark eyes fluttered open, terrified, confused, struggling to focus. Marcus lowered her gently to the ground, kneeling in the dust. He dampened a cloth with water from his canteen and moistened her parched lips. "Rest easy," he murmured. "You're protected now, at least temporarily." She blinked slowly, twice. No words emerged, but her fingers weakly grasped his shirt sleeve. He glanced once more at the hateful sign, then at her vulnerable form, before removing his jacket and wrapping it around her trembling shoulders. "What do they call you?" he asked softly. No response. "We'll discover that in time," he said. Rising carefully, he lifted her fragile form, cradling her like precious cargo. "For now, you're under my care." With that declaration, Marcus Webb retreated into the wilderness, carrying a condemned woman and bearing a burden that could destroy any man. The sun hung low when Marcus reached his homestead, a humble outpost clinging to the desert's edge, where violence lingered like morning mist. A solitary windmill creaked against the horizon, and the weathered barn sagged with the weight of forgotten sorrows. The house itself, single room plus loft, roof patched with salvaged metal, stood resolute and honest, like its builder. Marcus carefully removed the woman from his saddle and carried her inside. Fever consumed her, her head pressed against his chest as whispered breaths escaped like autumn leaves dancing across stone. He placed her on his cot and removed the jacket, moving slowly to avoid startling her. Her eyes opened briefly. Deep, wide, distant, but they watched him intently. Lamplight flickered against wooden walls as he filled a metal basin with water and positioned it near her feet. Retrieving clean cloth from a shelf, he knelt beside her. Her legs bore purple bruises and scrapes, one ankle swollen, rope burns marking her wrists like cattle brands. "I won't cause you pain," he said, more to fill the silence than expecting acknowledgement. "Just cleaning these wounds." He soaked the cloth in warm water and wrung it out, then gently, reverently, took her right foot and lowered it into the basin. She flinched almost imperceptibly. He paused, waiting. When she didn't withdraw, he began washing away the accumulated dust and dried blood. His movements were tender, precise, as if handling something sacred. The water turned rusty brown as he worked in silence, careful not to stare too long, though he felt her gaze upon him like a blade half-drawn, uncertain whether to strike or fall. Her lips parted once as if to speak, but no sound emerged. "Reckon you don't speak much," he muttered, not unkindly. "That's fine. Silence beats most conversation." He finished cleansing the first foot, then the second. She permitted his ministrations. When completed, he wrapped both feet in soft cloth strips and positioned them gently on a folded blanket. "You remind me of a stream I used to camp beside," he said quietly, almost to himself. Dry most seasons, appeared lifeless, but after the rains it ran swift and deep. Had a proper name, but locals called it Quiet Snake. Never knew why. Just quiet. He studied her again in the lamplight, cheekbones sharp as mountain ridges, lips cracked but full, dark lashes thick with sand. Too young for such suffering, yet something ancient dwelt behind her eyes, something that didn't flinch from pain but simply waited for it to pass. "I'll call you Maya," he said softly. "Just for now. You look like a Maya, quiet but strong." She blinked once, slowly. No protest, no agreement. Just breath. Just being. Marcus rose, hands still damp, and reached for a blanket to cover her. He tucked it around her shoulders, then stepped back. "If you're hungry, there's beans. Not much, but better than nothing." Still no response. He grabbed his bedroll and dragged it toward the door. He would sleep by the barn tonight, giving her space. It wasn't proper for her to be watched by a stranger, especially one with blood in his past and questions in his eyes. Before stepping outside, he looked back once more. She had shifted slightly, eyes closed, lips no longer trembling. The basin still sat beside the cot, stained with the color of what had been done to her. He carried it outside and emptied it, watching the water soak into the thirsty earth. Inside, she dreamed of fire, of horses, of ropes cutting skyward, and of gentle hands washing away pain without demanding anything in return. The following days passed with the slow rhythm of desert life, but the silence within the house had changed, thicker, charged with something just beyond comprehension. Maya, as Marcus continued calling her, ate when he brought food, though sparingly. She moved with caution, eyes always alert, posture tense like a caged animal too long confined. She never spoke, but he caught her watching him when she thought he wouldn't notice. At night, Marcus surrendered the cot to her and retreated to the barn, rifle beside him. He claimed it was to provide her privacy, but the truth was more complex. He was afraid, not of her, but of what her presence meant. That sign on the tree still burned in his memory, "White man don't forgive." Whoever wrote it had intended her slow death, and whoever they were might still be coming. 3 mornings later, he discovered the first boot print, slightly smaller than his own, newer, angled toward the barn. Marcus crouched beside it in the hard-packed dirt, studying the heel. Military issue, cavalry. The print was fresh, no more than a few hours old. He rose slowly, eyes scanning the ridgeline. Nothing but sagebrush and heat shimmer. Back inside, Maya sat by the window, still and silent. She didn't look at him when he entered, but her body tensed. "You seen anyone?" he asked. She said nothing, only pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "I think we've got company," Marcus murmured, more to himself. That evening he kept the lantern low and stayed on the porch, rifle across his knees. The wind had died, coyotes howled in the distance, and stars blinked into view like ghosts awakening. Maya didn't sleep, he could hear her moving inside, pacing the floor in slow circles. Around midday the next day, the rider came. Dust curled behind the chestnut horse as it approached. The man atop wore the blue and gold of the U.S. Cavalry, rifle holstered, hat low, jaw rough with stubble. Marcus stepped down from the porch, one hand resting casually on his belt. The soldier reined in his horse and squinted down. "You called Webb?" "Depends who's asking." "Lieutenant Torres, Dust Hollow Station. We're tracking a fugitive." The man pulled a folded notice from his breast pocket and handed it down. "You seen this one?" Marcus took the paper, already knowing what it would show: a crude sketch of a young Apache girl, sharp eyes, long hair. The words: wanted for murder and escape, dangerous, reward $500. Marcus looked up slowly. "Can't say I have." "You sure?" the soldier asked, leaning forward. "Small, quiet, might be hurt, might be hiding. We think she was rescued or taken by someone passing near the Cartonwood Flats." Marcus held the paper a second longer, then folded it and handed it back. "Ain't seen nobody but jackrabbits and a cow that don't listen." Lieutenant Torres narrowed his eyes. "She's not just a runaway, Mr. Webb. She's part of a violent group. Savages. That sign they left, they mean it." Marcus's jaw tightened. "If I see anything, I'll send word." The soldier studied him for a moment longer, then nodded once and turned his horse. "See that you do." Marcus watched him ride off until the dust disappeared. Inside, Maya stood just beyond the curtain. She had heard every word. She stared at him, unmoving. He stepped inside, took off his hat, and leaned it against the door. "They came looking. Showed me a paper. Said you were wanted." She did not speak. "I told them no." Her eyes narrowed, confused, suspicious. "I don't know what you did, Maya, and maybe someday you'll tell me. But out here, a man makes choices. I made mine." He turned to the stove, pretending to stir the beans he had already prepared. Behind him, she moved, barely a shift, a small breath, and in that moment, trust cracked the silence just a little wider. The afternoon sun hung low, casting long shadows across the yard as the wind softened. It had been a strange day. Too quiet, like the desert was holding its breath. Marcus sat on the porch, sharpening his knife with slow, rhythmic strokes. Each pass of steel on stone echoed faintly through the open yard. He focused on the motion more than the blade, as if the repetition might keep his thoughts from drifting too far toward the woman inside. He paused, cocking his head. The faint crunch of footsteps on gravel reached his ears. Not a coyote, not a horse, something lighter, human. He looked up. Maya was outside. It was the first time she had stepped beyond the threshold on her own since he brought her home. Her bare feet touched the earth tentatively, like she was testing if it would still hold her. The woven blanket hung from her shoulders, trailing like a second skin. She walked slowly, her steps uneven but certain, toward the far end of the yard where the barn stood watch. Marcus set the knife aside, not moving at first. He watched her, not wanting to shatter the moment. She looked smaller in the light, more fragile, and yet something in the way she moved had changed. She was not escaping, she was reclaiming. She reached the bare patch of dirt near the barn, a place where the wind had swept clean all debris. There she knelt carefully, as if kneeling before something sacred, and let the blanket fall to her elbows. Her fingers moved with purpose as she picked up a stick and began to draw in the dust. Only then did Marcus rise. He walked over slowly, boots quiet on the dirt, giving her space. He stood a few feet behind her, watching her hand trace lines into the earth. In the dirt, she had drawn a bird, wings stretched wide, mid-flight, but flames encircled it like a burning crown. The lines were bold and sharp, etched with tension. The bird looked alive and in agony, its wings angled upward as though trying to escape the fire or rise with it. Marcus had seen war, seen symbols carved into rifles and burned into skin, but this was something older. A cry, a prayer. He squatted beside her, his voice low and respectful. "What's that?" Maya did not look up. Her face remained still, eyes focused on the drawing. For a long moment, she said nothing, as if deciding whether or not to let the memory free. Then she spoke. "Bird in fire," she said, voice dry and cracked like riverbeds in midsummer. "My people's sign." Marcus remained silent, his eyes never leaving the image. She tapped the center of the bird with the stick. "This was my father's. Our family. We painted it on tents, carved it on boughs. Always flying, always fire." Marcus could feel the tension in her body, the way her shoulders pulled back, the tightness in her jaw. She was bracing for something. "They come, soldiers, white coats, last spring," she continued haltingly. "Say we must move. Far, dry place. No food, no water. Say we're danger." She paused, the stick in her hand trembling. "We say no. We stay. We fight." Her voice thinned. "They burn. Kill my mother, my 2 brothers. Burn the old ones inside the tent." Marcus clenched his fists slowly, jaw tight. Something old and angry stirred in his chest. "I run. Hide. They find me. Beat. Tie me. Call me thief. Say I took rifle. I didn't." Then she turned, locking eyes with him for the first time. There was fury in her voice now. "I did not steal. I did not kill. I did nothing wrong." Her voice echoed in the open air like thunder across dry land. Marcus did not speak for a moment. Then his voice came, low but certain. "I believe you." She turned back to the dirt, dropped the stick. Her hands fell into her lap. Then her shoulders began to shake. At first, she made no sound, just silent tremors, but then the sobs came, raw and unfiltered. She curled forward, arms wrapped around her knees, hair falling like a curtain. The pain was too big for her body, and it poured out in waves. Marcus stayed beside her, unmoving. He did not reach for her, did not try to comfort with empty words. Instead, he reached out and pressed his hand into the dirt beside the flaming bird, palm down, fingers spread. His skin against the dust she had shaped with grief. It was not touch, it was testimony. She felt it. Eventually, her breathing slowed. She lifted her head, her face streaked with dirt and tears. Their eyes met, unshielded. "You can call me Maya," she whispered. Marcus gave a small nod, voice like gravel and wind. "All right then. Maya it is." They sat together in silence as the sun slid behind the ridge and the fire bird in the dirt faded into shadow. But its ashes, like the truth, remained. That night, the wind whistled low through the rafters, whispering through the thin walls like a ghost remembering its name. Marcus sat by the fire, boots off, shirt sleeves rolled, tending a kettle of beans. Maya stood by the window, arms folded around herself, watching the night settle over the desert. The silence between them no longer felt like a wall. It was something gentler now, like shared breath. She turned suddenly. "You want to know the truth?" Marcus looked up, his spoon pausing mid-stir. He nodded once, careful not to press her with words. She walked slowly to the table, sat across from him. Her voice was quiet but clear. "My father was a miner chief," she began. "Our band small, peaceful. We traded with settlers, even learned their god. We had rules, boundaries. We wanted to live." Marcus listened, his face unreadable but focused. "Full winter ago," she continued, "a white woman was found dead near our hunting ground. Throat cut. Her husband said it was us." Her fingers tensed around the table's edge. "But it was not. She died because he killed her. Everyone knew, but they blamed us." Her eyes found Marcus's. "The soldiers came. Not just them, ranchers too, townsmen with rifles and fear. They said they were taking justice." She swallowed hard, the pain rising in her throat. "They burned our camp. Shot my brothers while they slept. My mother died holding the prayer beads the priest gave her. They left my father hanging from our council pole." Marcus lowered his eyes. "They found me in a hollow tree. I was hiding. I had a knife, but they took it. Said I was planning revenge. Said I was dangerous. They tied me, questioned me, beat me. Then they took me to that tree you found me on. Hung me up like bait." "For who?" Marcus asked, his voice a low scrape. "For the rest of us. For anyone still alive and angry." She stared at him, then asked softly, "Why did you cut me down?" He looked at her for a long moment, the fire crackling between them. "Because once," he said, "I didn't." Her brow furrowed. "My family," Marcus said, voice flat. "Last spring. Raiders hit our ranch." "Apache," they said. "Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. I was out hunting. Came back to ashes. My sister was 16. I heard her crying in the barn, but I was scared. I didn't go in. I waited for help. She died before anyone came." The silence after that was different. Not empty, heavy. "You saved me because you couldn't save her," Maya whispered. He nodded. She studied him. "If I had been white, would you still have pulled the knife?" Marcus stood slowly, walked around the table until he was in front of her. She looked up, searching his face. He reached down, cupped her chin gently in one hand. His fingers were calloused, but his touch was careful, measured. "I don't love skin," he said. "I love what breathes under it." Her eyes welled, but no tears fell. She reached for his hand, pressed her cheek into his palm. And then, as if by instinct, they leaned into each other. The kiss was quiet, hesitant at first, then fuller, as if both had been holding their breath for too long and finally remembered how to exhale. Her hands trembled on his chest. His arms circled her back. The fire popped softly behind them. Later, they stood in the small kitchen, candlelight flickering against old wooden beams. Their shadows moved as one on the far wall, a slow dance neither of them had ever learned but somehow knew. Outside, the desert wind calmed for the first time in days. Inside, something began to mend. The wind returned with the morning, gusting harder than usual, carrying the scent of sand and distant smoke. Marcus felt it in his bones, something shifting. He had lived long enough under the sky to recognize the wait before a storm, even if it came with boots instead of clouds. 3 days had passed since the kiss, since the words neither of them said aloud took root in the silence. Maya had begun to move more freely around the ranch. She helped feed the animals, swept the floor, even laughed once softly when Marcus cursed the stubborn mule that refused to eat. But the peace was thin. By noon, a trail of dust rose from the east. Marcus stood by the fence, jaw tight, rifle resting against the porch. 3 riders approached, local men in canvas coats and old hats, rifles slung across their backs. Their leader wore a tin badge on his chest that looked more self-appointed than earned. "Webb," the man called as he dismounted. "Heard tell you might be harboring someone don't belong." Marcus kept his voice even. "You hear a lot of things, Frank. Don't make them true." Frank Mitchell spat into the dirt. "A girl. Apache. There's a reward, $50 cash and the thanks of every God-fearing man west of the Pecos. You come all this way for a rumor?" Mitchell's eyes narrowed. "We aim to check inside. Just in case." Marcus stepped down from the porch slowly. "You got a warrant?" Mitchell snorted. "You think this is a court, Webb?" The other 2 men shifted in their saddles, hands near their weapons. The air hung brittle. "I'm the only one lives here," Marcus said, voice calm. "Ain't no girl. Just ghosts and goats." Mitchell stared at him for a long moment, then gave a tight nod. "If you're lying, you'll burn with her." They rode off without checking the house, but the message was clear. They would be back, with more men and less patience. That night, Marcus sat by the fire behind the barn, the stars hidden behind heavy clouds. In his hand was the crude wooden sign he had pulled from where he buried it, faded now, but still readable, still hateful, "White man don't forgive." He stared at it for a long time, fingers brushing over the letters. Then he stood and carried it to the fire pit. No ceremony, no speech. He laid it down among the kindling and struck a match. The flames rose slowly, then swallowed the words in orange and gold. The wood cracked and curled inward, as if the hate itself resisted dying. Behind him, footsteps. Maya. She wore one of his old coats, too large on her frame, the sleeves rolled twice. She stepped beside him, eyes on the fire, not speaking, but her presence spoke enough. The flames danced in her eyes, reflecting something that looked like mourning and something like freedom. "I should have burned it sooner," Marcus said quietly. She did not answer, But she moved closer, close enough for her shoulder to touch his. She gripped the coat tighter around herself, her fingers knotted in the fabric. "Thank you," she said softly. The words were simple, but they landed like something sacred. He looked down at her, his heart heavy and alive all at once. The fire burned low, embers glowing. Above them, the wind slowed to a hush. And for the first time since he cut her down from that tree, there was no sign left of what had been written against her. Only heat, smoke, and the weight of what they had chosen instead. The next morning brought no wind, just stillness, thick and unnatural. Marcus rose early, packed dry biscuits, jerky, and a canteen of water into the stillbag. The air around the ranch felt tighter, more watched. He had seen smoke on the horizon, too steady to be a campfire. Word had spread. They were out of time. Maya stood by the fence line, hair braided back, wrapped in the same coat she had worn by the fire. Her face was calm, but her eyes held questions. "We have to go," Marcus said, tying the final strap on his pack. "Tonight?" She nodded, already knowing. "There's land south of here," he continued, past the border. "Some say the Apaches still live free in the Sierra Madres. Far from soldiers, far from signs." He paused. "We can make it if we ride hard." Maya stepped closer. So close he could see the soft flush on her cheeks. She reached for his hand and held it firm. He looked down at her, voice barely above a whisper. "You'll come with me?" She pressed her forehead to his chest, her breath warm through his shirt. Then she answered in Apache, slow and careful, "I want to live. I want to live as your wife." Marcus closed his eyes. That one sentence carried more weight than 1,000 promises. He kissed the top of her head, breathed in her hair like it was the last thing keeping him grounded. By sundown, they were ready. 2 horses saddled, the ranch left behind. No note, no fire, no goodbye. Just a quiet door left swinging and a home turned to memory. They rode through the desert under cover of stars, moonlight painting the ridges silver. Maya leaned forward against her horse, her movements steady, practiced. She did not ask what lay ahead. She only followed. 10 miles from the border, the land opened into low scrub brush and stone cliffs. Marcus scanned the horizon constantly, every shadow a threat. His gut turned tight. Then the shot came. A crack echoed across the plain. Marcus jerked in the saddle, then collapsed sideways, sliding hard into the dirt. "Marcus!" Maya screamed, leaping from her horse. He clutched his side, blood already soaking through his shirt. "Keep going," he rasped. "No." Another shot whizzed past them, striking the rock behind. From the ridgeline, 2 figures appeared, riders, rifles raised. Marcus groaned, pulling himself up. "We have to move." Maya hooked her arm under his shoulder, trying to lift him. "Lean on me," she growled. "I won't leave you." Through sheer will, they stumbled toward the nearby rocks, bullets cutting through the night. Marcus's boots dragged behind him, but he forced one step after another. Every breath came wet. His vision blurred. Somehow, they reached a narrow gap between 2 cliffs, a hidden pass. Maya half dragged, half carried him inside, pressed him to the stone wall, her own chest heaving. The shots faded behind them. The riders would not follow through the rocks, not without losing speed, not without risk. In the shadow of the pass, Marcus collapsed to his knees, blood dripping onto the dust. He looked up at her, pain and wonder both in his eyes. "You said you wanted to be my wife." She knelt beside him, cupped his face. "I meant it." His lips curved, even through the pain. "Then we better make it through this pass." She nodded, and for the first time since they met, Maya prayed not to the gods of the settlers, but to the spirits of fire, wind, and survival. Because love, in this place, was always a gamble. And tonight, they were betting everything. The tent flaps rustled gently in the river breeze, moonlight slipping through the stitched seams like silver threads. Outside, crickets sang low, and the water whispered over stone. Inside, Marcus lay propped on folded blankets, his breath slow but strong now. The fever had passed. The worst was over. Maya sat beside him, a basin of cool water at her side, gently wiping down his brow. He watched her through half-lidded eyes, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly. "You always this bossy with your patients," he murmured. She raised an eyebrow but smiled. "Only the ones too stubborn to die." He chuckled, then winced as the laughter tugged at the stitches in his side. She hushed him gently, placing a palm over his chest to steady him. The silence between them deepened, not awkward, but full. Then, as the wind sighed outside, he spoke again. "Tell me something true," Marcus said, his voice softer now, touched by something raw. "What's your real name?" Maya looked down, hesitating. Then she reached for his hand and guided it to her chest, just over her heart. "Iona," she said. "It means eternal blossom. My father gave it to me." Marcus closed his eyes for a beat, as if letting the name settle into him like a prayer. When he opened them again, there was warmth behind the weariness. "Iona," he repeated, tasting the word. "You're the only beauty I've ever known." She didn't cry this time. She only held his hand tighter. Months passed on the southern edge of the territory, where the border blurred into mesquite groves and dry wind carried scents of sage and wildflowers. A small lodge stood near the river's bend, made of pine and hide, strong but humble. It sat surrounded by whispering reeds and wild blooms. In the shade of its awning, Iona sat cross-legged, stitching a tiny white shirt. Her belly had rounded gently, visible now beneath her woven sash. Humming quietly, she worked the needle through soft cotton, her fingers sure and calm. Beyond the garden, Marcus trained a young mustang, murmuring low commands, patient and firm. Every so often, he glanced back toward the lodge, catching sight of her silhouette through the light curtain. And every time, he smiled. Inside, the walls bore no trophies, no portraits, just bundles of herbs, 2 books, and a child's blanket waiting to be finished. Iona moved through it like the breath of the place itself, present, grounding, full of quiet life. One evening, she walked down to the river, the same path she'd taken for months now. The current moved slow and certain. She stepped barefoot into the shallows, let the cool water kiss her skin, and laid both hands over her belly. "Little one," she whispered, "your father, he didn't just forgive. He loved. And he kept his promise to everyone." Behind her, footsteps pattered across the grass. Marcus came to stand beside her, their fingers entwining without a word. Together, they watched the river drift under the dusk, where stars began to blink into view. No one had expected 2 hunted souls to find something like this. But somehow, in a world of scars and storms, they had created a quiet patch of earth where love had taken root. Not the kind written in history books, but the kind that endured. And the river kept flowing peaceful, like her name, like their life, like something finally, truly home.